Vince, thank you, sir. Greatly appreciate it. Let me harass
welcome.
you for a little bit.
You're welcome.
Now, I love you're wearing your Auburn. You got some pride in those Tigers, right?
Got to show my my pride, my school colors.
Well, I've got my own school pride.
Oh, yeah?
With other Tigers, it's Clemson though.
Listen, I love Clemson.
So let the debate begin.
I love Clemson. A dear friend of mine wrote at least one book, Lusahadi, about Clemson.
Oh yes.
And he's been a very dear friend. I'll tell you those stories. And his daughter actually still lives there. But yeah, he's written at least I know one book about Clemson, maybe two.
Yeah. Well, the question is the campus layout, design. What came first? Was it Clemson and then Auburn copied Clemson, or was it the other way around?
I think there's a lot of mutual admiration there. They are mirror images,
yes,
actually. And Clemson's a wonderful place. Auburn's a wonderful place. I mean, you know, these college towns are just, there's nothing like them in the country. I mean, there's nothing like these college towns.
So what does Auburn mean to you?
Well, it's interesting because, you know, and every school says this, but you say the Auburn family. So I'll explain to you what I think that means. You have to understand, so in the state of Alabama, you're either Auburn or Alabama, and you basically grow up with that. And obviously Bear Bryant had a lot of influence on that. But Alabama is sort of known as, you know, the bankers and the lawyers and the doctors. Auburn being a land-grant college, has tended to attract more rural students, such as I was coming out of a town of 800 in rural lower Alabama. And so, so the student body, the composition is for some reason just a little different, and it lends itself more to a familiar atmosphere. And then you have the small town sensibilities of Auburn, and then the types of studies that you find there being a land-grant institution. So when they really truly say the Auburn family, it means a little bit more than just say an athletic connection. And so, but it, you know, I wouldn't, whatever limited success I've achieved in life, it certainly would not have happened without my experience there.
So Auburn shaped you.
Absolutely. Well, you have to understand, I grew up in a town of rural Alabama, lower Alabama as we call it.
Yeah, LA, right?
LA.
Don't get confused with
one red light.
Los Angeles. Oh yeah, that's small.
800 people. My dad was a mayor, had a grocery store, and it was a Mayberry-esque existence. And I went to Auburn, just wanted to be a sports writer and go back to the Mobile Press Register and be a reporter. And it was the biggest place I'd ever been outside of going to a Saints game in New Orleans or Opryland in Nashville, or you went to Disney World in Orlando. And so it was an overwhelming experience the first year. Never seen that many people, never seen that many, you know, but I really immediately recognized there was a caste system of the rich kids and the not rich kids.
How quickly did you realize that?
Pretty quick, because I had never seen an Izod shirt. I'd never seen tree-torn tennis shoes. We call them tennis shoes. I'd never seen, you know, plaid breeches. So I thought I'd really kind of landed on an alien planet. And I did not have any idea about fraternity lives or anything, no idea. And lived in an off-campus apartment. And so pretty quick, I was like, you know, I don't think I'm getting out of this college experience what I'm supposed to be getting. I didn't know what that meant, but I just innately knew it, inherently knew it. So I went back to my hometown, Chatham, summer of 81. Let's go, yeah, 81. And so when I went back to Auburn, I was determined that I was going to try to figure out what that college experience meant.
How to get more involved.
Yeah, at some level, because I just didn't feel, I mean, short of me loving Auburn football, I just didn't feel connected to it. And so my first journalism class, I wasn't a very good student. Fortunately, I was a decent writer, and was taught by the head of sports information, a guy named David Housel. And he described the press box and the locker room and all these amazing things. And excuse me, what I tell these kids is that after the class, I went up and took the shot. I said, hey, I want to be a part of that. I want to volunteer. And he said, well, come this afternoon. I was like, wow. And so not only did that moment change my life, David Housel also happened to be the faculty editor of the Auburn Plainsman. So I started writing for the school newspaper, and he was the house father at Phi Gamma Delta, the Fiji house. And he said, you need to come over and have lunch with me and these guys. And I go, well, my only perception of fraternities was Animal House.
Yeah.
He goes, no, it's not like that. So I get over there, and it's just, guys like me. And so that single, and I joined. I'm still shocked that they let me in.
They accepted you, right?
Probably great regret. But that single moment, seminal moment, and by the time I had graduated, I had produced hundreds of sporting events, had been published hundreds of times, had a portfolio that thick, and made my best friends in the world through the Fiji house. So I tell these kids a couple things, like never be afraid to take that shot. Because if I hadn't taken that shot, my trajectory in my life would have been totally different. And that look all around you, particularly now with technology and all that, the college campus is the ultimate professional lab for a young aspiring professional in any capacity.
What do you mean?
Use me as the example. I mean, I was able to lay the foundation for my profession at the Sports Information Department. And now there's an SEC network outpost there. There's sophisticated fan experiences. There's sophisticated ticketing. You can tutor athletes. And whether even if it's not sports or not, very sophisticated causes and fundraising. And even I tell these kids that even if they're working at a Starbucks or a coffee shop, they're not just a waitress or a barista, they're on the front lines of customer service. So look all around you for these nuggets of opportunities. Even if you're involved in a club or a Greek life or anything like that, any form of practical experience that can enhance the investment that you're making in your academic experience, while also, having the fun, is, I highly encourage it. And that's why I like to go back to these schools and talk to these kids about that, because sometimes the most obvious answer is right in front of you, and they may not.
And you miss it.
They may not be aware that it's right there.
That's right.
And nobody's really told them. Nobody told me. It just was a divine intervention.
Yeah. Have you always been that type of person that is willing to take the shot, to go up there and ask, and not afraid to hear no, or not afraid to what the answer might be?
Well, yeah, and early on as a child, I made my parents, drive me to get autographs. Early on at the Senior Bowl that Richard Todd played in, I'd go on the field after the game. The old days, you get their chin straps. Early on, I would write letters to my professional heroes, such as Hank Aaron, for an autograph, and that's the days they would answer. I even talked my way, I think, when I was 11. I'll have to find the photograph, into the Atlanta Braves dugout, and my parents looked down, and I'm actually having a conversation with Ralph Garr, who had happened to be the hitting champion that year. Now, think about all of those things in context of now. You could never get away with those things. So the thing I tell the kids is the letters N-O don't spell no. It's just the first two letters of not yet. And so I've just been blessed that I was able to pursue my passion with zeal, but I had great parents who supported that pursuit of the passion.
Yeah, I was going to ask you where that came from. Where did that ability to not be afraid to ask those questions?
Well, first of all, not knowing any better, and secondly, the encouragement of my parents. Just like, hey, these are people. They're probably honored that you want their autograph, and so. And then, like I said, in those days, it wasn't like the professional collectors and the autographs and all that. And so, I've got I'm at some of the great ones. So you can imagine when I got to Auburn, and there's Bo Jackson and Charles Barkley and the Big Hurt and Harvey Glantz, fastest man in the world, and Rowdy Gaines, one of the greatest swimmers of all time. You're surrounded by this, but then you realize they're people too. They have exceptional skills to do things. But now, like I said, with these kids now, the college students, is that you have all the tools in front of you in your hand. In the old days, you'd have to go to the library and go to the White Pages Encyclopedia, and now you possess all
so much information.
Oh, it's so much information.
So much information. You just have to be proactive to do it.
You have to be proactive, but in fairness, a lot of the kids they wouldn't be conditioned to think that way.
That's right.
It was always just second nature to me, and so I really have not really. I'm still the kid, and that's why doing what I do never gets old, and being able to do it with amazingly bright, talented people in the world of sports.
What was life like growing up, the son of a mayor in a small town? Was there added pressures on you that there might be a spotlight?
I was Opie Taylor.
Okay.
I fished 200 days a year. Worked in the grocery store, sang in the choir, the volunteer fire department, played sports, not very good at it, but loved it, played it, wrote about it, rode your bike. I knew that I had a higher responsibility, because my dad was the mayor and had the town grocery and all that kind of stuff.
Did you have conversations with your dad about that?
Only when I would veer into getting in trouble.
How often was that, though?
It was about twice, because I never had any ill words with my dad except those couple times. But I mean, it was just it's just a different, like we were talking about. There's no cell phones and all these crazy things. I mean, you just went outside and you played. In every game was a World Series or Super Bowl, and then you were just home at dark. I mean, that was pretty much it. So, like I said, I had a narrow view of the world when I got to Auburn, and so maybe not narrow, but I just had been in this insular environment, right? And that was kind of my first dose of reality when I got there. But I'm like, I think I'm decently intelligent, and I know I'll outwork people, and it may take me a day or two, but I'm going to do something special. And I really didn't know what that was, other than I knew I wanted it. Well, first of all, I really wanted to be Mark McCormick. I really wanted to be the agent, the IMG, Jerry Maguire, and all that. I didn't have the means or the resources or the tools to do that, because I thought you had to go to law school to start that. I didn't have the grades and I didn't have the money. So I'm like, well, I'm here at Sports Information. I've fallen in love with the business of college sports. I think that's where I'll pursue the route.
Yeah, it seemed like at the time, from what I remember growing up as well, that agents, they were lawyers, and
they were all lawyers.
I thought the same thing.
They were all lawyers.
You have to be a lawyer to be some type of agent.
Well,
because
it was driven by contracts at the time.
Yes.
And it's still driven by contracts, but it was the primary source of income was that contract you negotiated with that team.
That's right. It wasn't the marketing outside of the salary.
If you look at what Jimmy Sexton has done, and the story's amazing, and what he's been able to pull off. I mean, it's an unbelievable story, and I tell him all the time when I talk to him that I envy that he was able to pursue that path, and that I didn't pursue that path, but he'll tell you it was for him it was a divine intervention as well, through being roommates with Reggie White.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's crazy how one thing like that can lead to a career. What he's been able to do.
And he's got those same kind of small town sensibilities as well. And when we negotiate a deal, he's just as he's tough, but he's fair and straightforward.
And that's what you want. Yeah, just give me a nice handshake.
Yeah, we did Coach Saban and Aflac, and a lot of people said, "There's no way you'll get this done." And I'm like, "Yeah, we'll get it done," because Jimmy's he's a great negotiator, but so. It's it certainly has not been boring.
No, it hasn't.
Still is not.
I know it's not. What was it about sports writing Why did you have this affinity that you wanted to be a sports writer? What was the beauty of, I guess, the written word with sports?
I think back in the old days, like when you went to your mailbox and you got Sports Illustrated and the sporting news that week, or you got the Mobile Press Register in the afternoon, just reading about those exploits and reading about them on the baseball cards, and the old days of Pat Summerall and Keith Jackson and Monday Night Football and Howard Cosell and the Dandaroo and Joe Gargiulo on Saturday. I mean, I'm like, man, this is, I'm not going to be able to play it professionally, but I want to be a part of it. And even to the point, our annual summer vacation used to be an Atlanta Braves game, which was a big venture, right?
It's a big deal.
And my favorite team was the Big Red Machine. So this is how bad it was. I would call the Reds organization on the landline and say, where is the team going to stay while they're playing the Braves? And I would make my parents stay at that hotel, and I would camp out in the lobby so I could meet my heroes. And so I've still got the cards. I hit the trifecta. I got Pete Rose, I got Johnny Bench, I got Joe Morgan, I got Tony Perez, I got Dave Concepcion, I got George Foster. I was like, I'm just camped out in the lobby. And so, but I go back to my parents, I think about that now. I'm like, man, they must have thought I was insane, that dragging them to Atlanta and camping out in the lobby and calling. I mean, who does that when you're 11 or 12 years old, right?
I think it's crazy.
So,
I mean, I have some of those similarities where I would do that in Atlanta, not so much calling, but I would go camp out. But yeah. I think it's amazing that you would call.
You can't even go on the field now at the Senior Bowl and get a chin strap.
Exactly. I'm surprised they even gave you that information. But back then,
I just say, hey, I'm a big fan, and we're coming to see the game, and I want to stay where the team is so I can get autographs. And they go, oh, okay, well, they're at the downtown Marriott. Okay.
Not even a million years would that happen today.
All right. No, it's amazing. I'll never forget the first time I saw Pete Rose. He was coming down the stairs of the Marriott Marquis, and he had a burgundy or maroon velour tuxedo and had a bow tie, and I was like, oh my God, this is, larger than life. And many, many years later, I did a deal with him through Danny Sheridan, Big Odds Maker. And I said, I know there's no way in hell you're going to remember this, but as a kid, I encountered you and got your autograph. Where were you going? And he knew where he was going. I can't tell you what he said, but he said, oh yeah, I remember that night. I said, because it just struck me, why would you be dressed this way? And he just said, well, let's just say I had a good time that evening in Atlanta, Georgia.
That's amazing.
And that would have been 74, 75, 76. We won the 75 World Series against the Sox. Carlton Fisk, Game 6, Game 7. So it may have been 76. Well, I would have been 14.
Amazing. Why did you become a Cincinnati Reds fan?
Well, because they were the best team in baseball, and people forget there was only one game of the week. So they played a lot on Saturday afternoons. Tony Kubek and Joe Gargiulo. So I'm like, and I was a catcher. So, I wanted to be Johnny Bench, and if I wasn't, I was a second baseman, and I loved Joe Morgan.
Yeah, so it's easy to gravitate towards those guys because they're winning. That's the way I was with the Dallas Cowboys. When I was growing up, it was Dallas Cowboys. It was Roger Staubach.
Think about that. They were the only ones on TV,
yes,
too.
Of course.
People don't, I tell my son there were only 3 television channels, and one baseball game of the week, one Monday Night Football, one college football game, and one or 2 NFL games. He looks at me like, I'm, from another planet. Of course. Which we were back then.
Yeah, I remember I was the remote control. Hey, go change the channel, and I'd have to get up and go change the channel for my parents.
Oh, yeah. That's right. We were the remote control.
It was a different time back then.
Totally different. Yeah.
When did it hit you then at Auburn, or when you were getting ready to graduate, that you started figuring out exactly what you wanted to do within sports, and that it wasn't necessarily going to be a true sports journalist type of opportunity?
That's a good question. In hindsight, I should have stayed in Auburn and worked within the athletic department, and that's when the rights fees industry, Jim
Started
Host and others
changing.
were beginning to evolve.
Yeah. So why do you feel that you should have stayed?
Well, I took a job in Birmingham for really no reason other than a booster I'd encountered at Auburn. Had a bank in Birmingham, and I actually got an offer from Turner, because Turner used to come over and strain cable. I strained cable with Ted Turner when they were in 5 or 10 million homes, and they offered me $14,000 to move over here, and I was like, well, I can't live on that. And the offer in Birmingham was more lucrative, and it was with somebody that I knew. And people forget the cable industry was a very nascent industry, and so got to Birmingham, and it was for a bank, and you might as well have dropped me on Mars, and got fired after 6 months.
All right, give me the story then. How did you get fired?
I have no idea. I still don't have any idea. They just walked in and said, you're fired. I go,
But obviously you didn't love what you were doing then.
clearly I was not fit. And the round peg in the square hole certainly applies. But it wound up being, one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. And that's what I tell kids is like, you're going to get thrown off the saddle. There's not a question of that. It's a question of how you get back on it. And so that was the first real rude awakening, because you're like without a job and you're broke. And so but then I had a mild interest in Alabama politics because my dad was a mayor. Went to work for a governor's campaign, and we promptly just get clobbered. So I was 0 for 2. And I'm like, man, I got to get serious about this. And fortunately, Birmingham now, but at the time, there was Legion Field, and there was the Crimson Tide, and there was, a very vibrant sports scene. The Alabama gang of NASCAR, the Allisons, the Bonnets, and Hueytown was there. The Goth Channel was being formed in Birmingham, believe it or not. And so, and there were a lot of actually fishing and outdoor recreation companies in Alabama. So by divine intervention, there was a great agency there that was way ahead of its time in sports and recreation and consumer goods. And they needed a guy to write press releases. So I walk in with this big portfolio of articles that had been published at Auburn, and they're like, all right, well, you're hired. And it was nirvana, because they had a lot of fishing companies, and I loved to fish. And so I was going to fishing tournaments, and we were doing cable television shows. Back then, you could get anything placed on the ESPN. And I spent 7 years there, and it really was an amazing extension of my apprenticeship at Auburn.
At Auburn,
so those were very formative years, working for the gentleman, Barry Huey. That was really good. And then had a first encounter at Auburn, by the way, the Auburn-Alabama game, with a gentleman named Richard Scrushy, who was a very famous entrepreneur in sports medicine and healthcare. Okay. Founded a company called Health South, built it to $4 billion.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Dr. Jim Andrews, Dr. Larry Lemack, and was able to, I took my shot. I'd been trying to get his business for years. Saw him in the hallway at the Auburn-Alabama game, and said, I want to do something with you. I want to work with you. And he's like, well, come on. So here I am at 30, flying around on these fancy private jets that I'd never been on, with a guy who was had created a multi-billion-dollar company from scratch. Again, so I was, taking the shot. Yeah. And it
what did you learn from that experience? Seeing, the inner workings of...
I wanted to learn about public finance, because I had never really understood it all, and still don't understand it, but really wanted to be exposed to that. I wanted to work in a corporate environment one time. I wanted to be able to have because I'd always sort of been on the sell side, and so working for a company going on the buy side, I wanted to see what that experience was about. And he was such a brilliant entrepreneur that you could bring him the craziest ideas and he would never tell you they were crazy. In fact, he would probably add more to it and make it even a crazier idea. And so we had a lot of success together. We did a traveling kids roadshow that had Michael Jordan and Bo Jackson and Dr. Andrews. It impacted millions of kids' lives. We, did a major deal with the Coca-Cola company, which led me to this agency, starting this agency. Did a big deal with Disney, helped, stage major professional events. We were trying to get a dome built in Birmingham. We were thinking about acquiring a professional football team. I'm on a sailboat with Dr. Jim Andrews. I'm doing a deal with Christopher Reeve. I mean, it was a whole different level of exposure. And so, but I was also like, I don't think I want to be in corporate America the rest of my life. I want to do something on my own. And quite honestly, I had sort of outgrown Birmingham. It's a great town. It's a smaller town. It's governed by a lot of old money. And I was like, I want to go to a bigger pond, and I want to see if I'm as smart as I think I am. And if I'm not, failure was only the failure to try. And if I'm going to fail, I'm going to do it on my own terms, because I can always go back to work for somebody else.
You don't seem like a corporate guy.
I probably, but that's an understatement of the day. I think a lot of people would probably agree with that statement.
Yes. So from that time, then you start feeling that want something bigger. Is that when you had this thought, this, I don't know if dream is the right word, but of creating your own agency and this, what you've founded?
It was this weird tug in my gut, and it never would go away for about 2 years, 3 years.
Describe that.
It was just this omnipresent feeling that there was something else out there. The clock was running in my head as I was, beginning to be in my 30s. Some people said, well, your success is only based on the fact that Richard's successful and you've got this machine behind you. And I was thinking, well, that part of that's true, but also part of it's not. And when Tracy, my wife at the time, got pregnant with Carter, we were like, and I was like, if I don't dive in the deep end now, by the time he gets here, I'll be so risk averse, I'll never do it. And I may walk through life with the regret that I didn't do it.
Yeah. Did you feel that way? Because you seem like a guy that is open to risk. I mean, you've been able to take risks.
Yeah, I mean, when you come from basically nothing, we had a great life. I never wanted for anything, but wasn't great wealth like Buckhead or Mountain Brook or something like that. You tend to be more risk taking and risk tolerant, because you're like, well, what do I really have to lose? I can always go to work for somebody else. I know I've got talent and things to go do that. So I was like, and the other thing is I would be doing deals and activities with people at the highest levels. And over time, I would say to myself, I'm like, well, I'm as smart as they are. So this confidence.
It started building.
Not ego, but confidence started building, in that I was like, well, hey, I'm sitting here with Newt Gingrich. I'm sitting here with Bo Jackson. I'm sitting here with Jim Andrews. I'm sitting here with Michael Jordan. They're just like me, from the ability to have discussions and negotiations. And I always knew my ideas were bigger and better. I knew that, fortunately, I had this innate talent or gift or whatever it is. Some people may call it being BS, full of BS, and there's probably some degree of truth in that as well. But I was just like, hey, I can do this. And I didn't really know what that meant. I just knew the space I wanted to do it in. And Atlanta was coming out of a post-Olympic halo, and it was on fire, and it was this giant upward trajectory. So I'm like, hey, what do we got to lose?
So what was the moment then? I mean, did you wake up one morning and said, this is what I'm doing?
It evolved over probably 99, but particularly when Tracy became pregnant. So May, June 99, and there were some, which has been very well documented, but there were some things going on within the Health South organization that made me uncomfortable.
I remember that.
It was one of the largest frauds in corporate history, which I was not a part of. But that was the other. It was like, I'm really ready to evolve out of Birmingham. I want to be an entrepreneur. I've got a kid coming, and something's not right here.
Yes. So you had all these factors, and we know life is timing.
Right.
And it was timing for you.
You know, part of me wanted to go back to Laura, Alabama and go to the beach, go live at Orange Beach, Gulf of Mexico. But I also said, you know, I'm young. Let me go try my hand in the big pond. And if it doesn't work, then we'll figure something else out. And so, you know, I remember that first drive on I-20 East, looking in the rearview mirror with a 7-month pregnant wife, going, "Man, what have I done? What have we done?" And like, you know, and I'm like, "Oh my God!" So
was there a true sense of being afraid?
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, I made a good living. We lived in the house that Michael Jordan lived in Birmingham. I flew around on private jets. You know, we did fancy things all the time, exposure stuff. When I walked away, people were like, "Man, he's lost his mind.
He's crazy."
And there were times when I'm like, "Yeah, I have." But you know, when you're like the Walindas and you're walking across that canyon without a safety net, you just keep walking because you don't have a choice. And,
yeah, you made the commitment now.
By the way, when you got another mouth to feed, that's a whole nother bailiwick. So so at that time, you know, I took on anything that I could do. But fortunately, through some relationships I'd made at Health South with a family in Birmingham that happens to own one of the largest Coca-Cola bottlers, and we had done a big deal between Health South and the Coca-Cola Company, talking about paths and doors. I had met some of the senior leadership at Mothership Coca-Cola, and when I moved over here, and we had worked and helped them launch Powerade with our athletic trainers and all that. My first assignment and my first client working out of my home in Chastain Park was an assignment to keep managing athletic trainer relationships for Powerade on behalf of the Coca-Cola Company in the colleges, and that was it. So I'm schlepping coolers, I'm schlepping Powerade, you know, so I've gone from private jets to the back of an airplane, you know, schlepping sports drinks around. But I was damn glad to have that.
Were you enjoying it at that time?
Oh,
you loved it?
Well, yeah, I just felt unshackled too. You know, I'm in this new place. I'm away from the corporate grind. It was all about me. And this is the thing I tell these kids is that when I walked out of Health South and I left Health South, I made a target list of 100 professional contacts that I had made over my 37 years. And I assigned a monetary value to them to begin calling on them saying, "Hey, I'm going to get in the marketing business because I think my ideas are better. And if I could hit this particular goal in year one to get this much income, I'll know I'll be able to feed my family that year." So that was a pretty simple business strategy. So the thing I tell these kids as part of that professional lab at the colleges is you're surrounded by these amazing contacts, the sponsors, the people that come on campus to speak careers, the alumni, the alumni that run major companies that you want to target. Tim Cook at Apple is an Auburn grad, for instance. Yes. You know, the CFO of Delta, Auburn grad. So like mine those contacts and relationships early. Get you some business cards. Get you some note cards where you can write a handwritten note. You're showing that person who you are. And if they're going to invest in you as an employee, you're showing the self-starting and initiative and that commitment early of how you will be a future employee. So that's part of a lot of stuff I tell the kids.
Of course. Was there a moment, or do you have a few that you're sitting there now? Melt is, you're up and running. You're in Atlanta. Things are going well. But is there times where you're like, what the hell? I'm from Lower Alabama, and look at me. Look what we're doing right now. I mean, do you have memories of sitting there reflecting?
Yeah, I mean,
if you can, in the moment, because I know in the moment it's hard to reflect, but
well, it's interesting. That's a multifaceted question. One, I had always operated with a chip on my shoulder because of being in the small town. I use that as sort of a motivational. Like when I saw Rocky 1, I'm like, yeah, I can relate to that. It's 1976.
The underdog. You like that?
Then, as I was starting the climb, I think I'm just a nice person with a heart by nature. When I got into and I had just sort of been oblivious to it, but when I started my own company and move over to this big city, and I'm taking people at their face value and their word, and I'm getting clobbered, and people are saying all these crazy things, and who's this crazy guy, and where do you think he come from, and I'm like, man, these guys are saying all these crazy things about you. So that switch went off. I'm like, I gotta fight, and so I always had this fighter mentality, but I also was going to stay true to who I was. And so I'm not sacrificing my values. I'm going to tell you what I think, and some people like it and some don't. And those who don't, probably you don't want to do business with them anyway. And some who do, you gravitate to and you build from. But then there were just amazing times of great pride, and still walking into those corridors of the Coca-Cola company never gets old to me. It's like the first time. Walking onto those sidelines and in the tunnels and locker room never gets old to me. But then I also like to say that I'm sort of a poster child for crisis. So Lower Alabama, success at college, fired from first job, losing campaign second job, giant jobs, walk away from it all, start over, big city, newborn, 9/11, personal divorce, recession, corporate divorce, pandemic. I'm like, so that's what I try to share my story, because I'm like, you can do it, you can overcome it, you can keep moving, you keep grinding, you can stay focused, you can have a great deal of belief in yourself and great faith. And now with the world moving so fast, you have to treat one another the way you want to be treated. You have to treat the other person, because you don't know when all this is coming around. And I even tell kids, like, in 1982, I'm driving Dick Vitale and Brent Musburger and Paul Feinbaum to the airports from Auburn, and now I'm doing deals with them. Now I'm in business with them. So guys, you just don't know.
You don't.
And now with it, my old man, says the ball turns, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I say now it's like 24 seconds and 7 seconds. And so, so never, I learned a phrase from Coach Dye and Coach Stallings. I was having dinner with them one night, which was priceless. And I said, what's the secret? And they said, Coach Brian always used to say, always play like you're 7 points down. And so I've always played that way, and I'll try to instill that into the organization that, like, we've represented Coca-Cola for 20 years. That's unheard of. What's the secret? Never take them for granted. Always be honest, build that trust, and, work like hell. And so, and that's the secret to any relationship, which I wish I had learned a lot earlier, and which I try to impart that, on the kids. But, and then just, keep grinding. And as I say, you don't drive a car through the rearview mirror. You drive it through the windshield.
Yes.
So that way.
That forward focus. Yeah. In this type of industry, obviously, with all of the publicity, there's people around and all that, and you talk about staying true to yourself and your foundations and values. How hard is that? Because it seems like people try to do that, but they get trapped, and they go down the path just for the quick dollar, or they start taking shortcuts.
It's hard, but I think if you were raised or grounded in a certain type of values, which mine were sort of small town sensibilities, but it is. I mean, listen, I'm a poster child for knee scrape and entrepreneurial mistakes, and I'm a dreamer. So I mean, I've chased tons of rainbows, and
you didn't always catch them either, though, right?
Most of them you didn't. But that's the other thing is I'm not afraid to chase them, you know, because there's going to be another one. And so that's the kind of thing about ideas. It's like, aren't you worried about people steal your ideas? I'm like, not really, because there's going to be another one. And so, it's not even staying true to your values. Just stay sort of true to yourself.
Yes.
If you can. But there are so many more, you know, temptations and paths in society now. But that also, those tests, you know, iron's forged on iron. I mean, those tests, that metal, that grit comes with just, you know, my old man always said, just, you know, he's a poker player, keep enough chips to stay in the game, and you're going to draw a hand. You're going to draw some cards. They're going to, at some point, you're going to draw some cards. And so that was kind of, you know, always my thing is like, I don't need to have the biggest stack. I just need to be at the table, and I'm going to catch some cards. A putt's going to fall. But it's, you know, just.
But you got to be there. You got to keep doing it, right?
It's sheer tenacity,
yes.
Sheer grinding. That was another thing about Coach Bryant. Just always put yourself in position to win. You may not win them all, but be in the position to win. And so, and that's kind of what we try to instill within this organization.
Why do you think it is, in terms of society, the world, that there's just this gravitational pull towards sports? And obviously we're seeing it now, just everybody's, you know, wanting sports to get back to normalcy. Why do you think it's there?
It brings together a sense of togetherness. When you're sort of in a stadium with 80,000 people, and you might be pulling for the other team, it's just, you know, it's bonding, it's emotional connections, it's you know, sort of the ultimate reality show. It's a sense of escape. It's the admiration of the you know, the preparation that the athletes have made to be in a part of that. I think that's why the Olympics have always, because it's so emotional, and, you know, these kids prepare for 10, 20 years, and in 4 seconds or 4 minutes it's over or whatever. I think it's been interwoven in the fabric of the society, and so I think everybody's like, you know, we knew we loved sports, but we didn't realize how much we loved it or how much we would miss it. And that's all the way down to, you know, youth baseball and youth sports and community. And I jog every day in this park here, Chastain Park, and the jogging surrounds all these beautiful youth baseball fields, and they're just stunningly silent. And you can almost see the dirt and the grass because you can smell it, and it's quieter because there's fewer cars and all that. But you can just hear that grass almost like weeping for these kids to come back, you know? And even last night as I was jogging, they've closed the public golf course. So there are people out on the course picnicking things. There was actually a Little League baseball team having a practice on the public fairway of the public golf course. So I'm like, that's what it's about.
Yes.
It wasn't gonna this you know,
can't be stopped. Right.
And they were socially distanced and all that, but it was just so poignant. I stopped my jog and I just admired it. You know, I was like, man, that would have been me. You know, and I mean, they couldn't have been more than 8 years old. So it was just, you know, it's kind of
a great image.
It kind of reminds you, you know, really what's important. But hopefully sports will be back soon.
Yeah, I think it will. What motivates you today?
What motivates me today? There's several things that motivate me. One, I want to take care of my family still. Secondly, doing the best work in the world, still being the best. Third, we're using this period during this pandemic, if we don't lose anybody to health, to sort of repivot the business. It's kind of a gift that you can hit the reset button after being in business 20 years. We always wanted to evolve our intern program. We have a tremendous intern program called MELTU University based on my experience at Auburn. And I go talk to a bunch of kids, and we had 40 kids coming in this summer, but I always wanted to do more with it. I wanted to evolve it into a virtual format and share it with more than those 40 kids. And so we've been able to evolve that. We're going to have a series of podcasts and webcasts and things like this, where we're going to have the best people in the industry sharing their career path with thousands of kids, right? And so hopefully we'll motivate and inspire. I'm first time I've had the time to stop and write the book. So I'm putting all the things that I speak to these kids about how to get your first job. I'm putting them into this book and share it with a much wider audience. And I've always wanted to do that. So, the headers, doing the things with the time that you never thought you had the time to do. And so that'll be out. It's called You Have Me at Hello, What Successful, Job Seekers Do in a Post-COVID Environment. And so very excited about that. I'm gonna teach a chapter each week online, and then we're gonna have these, the commissioner of the PGA and the president of ESPN and president of Atlanta Hawks sharing their wisdom, which so in a virtual format, I'm able to help continue to connect and educate these kids. And so a lot of silver linings, like I said, if you don't lose anybody. I call it the grand pivot, the great reckoning, doing everybody, even walking through the park and seeing these families picnic at 5 o'clock on a Thursday or Friday when you'd be caught in traffic, or little league kids practicing in the fairway of a golf course, stopping and smelling the roses and things of that nature. And really, a self-examination of what's important, what's not, but being able to really help this next generation of event and sports professional marketers. I didn't have anybody tell me to run through these doors at Auburn. I had a fortunate encounter with the sports information director, but if I can just enlighten and help one kid, but we got kids that have, all over, Chick-fil-A, Coca-Cola, Home Depot, PGA, ESPN, the Falcons, the Broncos, the Bears. We've got this wonderful group of kids who's part of the legacy of Melt and part of my legacy. And
why does that have become so important to you to create?
Well, it was always important.
Yeah, why?
I had made a commitment to myself early on. I'm like, if I ever get in a position to help kids like me, I'm going to do that, because I didn't have a handbook. I didn't have a manual. I just saw a closed door, and I'm like, I'm going to ram through it. And so if I can, I've now been given this platform and been given this gift and been given these opportunities to do what I love. And lots of kids want to be in sports. They want to be in music. They want to be in esports. They want to be in festivals. They want to be in event production. And it is sexy and it is glamorous, but it's also the grind. And so I'm like, you need to go see early if this is something like, it's fun to go to an Auburn game, but be behind the scenes and behind the curtain, putting it on. It ain't. It's
ready to be lugging a cooler in the hot July summer,
right, and be willing to do what it takes. That's what I tell the kids. I said, I'm still doing what you're doing. I'm just doing it at a different level now. It's like they say, well, what business are you in? I'm like, I'm in the rejection business. I get told no 99 times out of 100. And, but NO is first two letters of not yet or whatever. So, if I can share any of that wisdom or impart that, cause it's tougher on this generation. It moves fast. The standards are higher. The social media, everybody thinks they're going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, but you don't read about the 99 of the 100 who weren't. So there's an expectation or a false expectation or a sense that there's going to be immediate gratification. And it's like hitting the lottery. That's immediate gratification, but a lot of people don't hit the lottery. So grind. And I'm still grinding it, 40 years later. So, and so if I can, like I said, if I can reach one kid, that'll be a good accomplishment for me.
Yeah.
And just, be the best sports marketing guy of all time, whatever that means.
That's right. However that's defined, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not one definition for that.
No. I mean, by the standards and the benchmarks that there are and that we've set, I think we're in decent company. And we've always punched, above our weight class.
Yeah. Obviously, things have changed over the couple of decades that you started Melt, and just obviously even in your career, especially from a marketing standpoint, as we're seeing now with athletes having all of these different types of endorsement deals, and now even name, image, and likeness really taking shape within college athletics. And what's your view on that and how that is going to impact college athletics and what it might mean?
Well, I've been around college athletes for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I got on campus at Auburn in 1980. And I've always believed that they should be able to take advantage more financially of that commitment that they've made. Whether in the old days it was selling an autograph program, selling the tickets they used to get, selling your game-worn jersey, getting paid to make an appearance. I always knew that I thought there was a disparity. It didn't matter for a long time until the money got really big. And so, and I say this sort of tongue-in-cheek to your guy Dabo, why should you be able to make $10 to $15 million a year if Trevor can't make the same money in the same environment, the same opportunities? And so I think it's going to be a positive thing. Everybody talks about boosters and bad apples. Well, there have always been boosters and bad apples. Okay. So where I see huge opportunities is, and people roll their eyes at me, but the non-revenue athletes are going to be able to, because they're usually paying their way. I use the Auburn women's equestrian team. They're paying their way. They're committed. They spend the time practicing. They spend the time studying. Why can't they showcase themselves for their careers? Why can't they get a deal with a saddle company? That's brand new money coming into the sport and the athletic department and the kid. And let's figure out a way to split that compensation. Maybe it goes part to finance the program. They're cutting sports now because of the athletic department budgets. So I think overall long term, it's going to be a great thing.
I think so too.
I think that, and I've said this on the record, there's seismic shifts coming in college athletics, and it has caused a forced modernization of the NCAA, which is long overdue. And so, because 99.9% of these kids don't play professional sports. So if a kid can make $5,000 or $10,000 a year, or position themselves for a job in the equine industry, that's a big deal.
Yes, it is.
And so that tends to, where I'm focusing my brains and energy and influence and thought process and business around creating those opportunities for those kids. Because when I hire, I always say hiring student athletes and former military personnel are the two greatest types of people you can hire. Self-starters, initiative, coachable, discipline, up early, adversary, obstacles overcoming, and so that. So I think if you look holistically, I think college esports is going to explode because those kids already have an expectation they're going to get paid. And why was Jake Fromm at Georgia not able to get paid? But if my son, who was a freshman at Georgia, able to post a video or play college sports, esports, and get paid, What's the difference?
That's what I've been
and by the way,
confused
we're not
about
even
the whole
talking
time.
about, not even talking about the First Amendment. We're not even talking about like those types of things. You know, like they suspended some receiver over at Georgia for selling his jersey. I mean, give me a break.
Exactly.
And so I think it's going to be,
especially as the NCAA talks about it's student first and then an athlete, right? So student athlete, but that student athlete doesn't have the same rights or abilities as a student can go. They can use their name, image, and likeness and earn money, but just because they signed a scholarship, they can't.
Yeah,
and that's wrong.
It's a complex issue, but it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. I agree.
So let's remove the complexities. Are there going to be some hiccups and skin knees? Absolutely.
And to your point, there's going to be some bad apples. Somebody's going to do something wrong.
But there's been bad apples since the beginning of time.
Exactly.
So that's really not going to change a hell of a lot. So I think there'll be growing pains in the process, but I think, like I said, it's going to be a good thing. And because I tack back to career development, because most of these kids don't have the time to search you'd be shocked the intern applications I get from student athletes, but they get it through ad hoc and word of mouth and friends and family, because they don't have the time to use the traditional career development within the university, that college, that school, and those types of things. And so
their athletic requirements are ridiculous.
Yeah. So like if they have an opportunity to talk about themselves and get compensated for it, and build an audience and build a platform, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, there's always going to be the Tuas and the Trevors and the Burrows and the Bo Nixes and all of that. But let's talk about the hundreds of that. And here's another thing. There's going to be so much new money come in, from legitimate new money, from sponsorships, because so at Auburn, there's 15 or 20 categories you can sponsor. And so now I may be able to go out to a lot of companies that cater to a female target, and whatever that is. And then endemic, when I say endemic, like a saddle or a boot company for riders, I think there's going to be so much new money coming in from that channel that we haven't even contemplated. And so there's nothing to me but upside.
I agree.
But what you find is the mentality is different from those who make the rules in college athletics, because a lot of times they're academicians and administrators versus a guy in the for-profit world like myself. So our lens is different.
It is.
And so if we can figure out a way to meld those two minds, and let's ask the student athletes, you know, like, what do you think?
Are we getting their voice heard?
Right.
Maybe not.
Because like my son's 20 and I'm 57, there's a whole big gap in the way we think about things.
Yes.
And that's the other thing that's been missed in this conversation, debate. This is the most sophisticated consumer ever, because of the technology and the mobile and the wireless and the social and access to information and ability to communicate. So that's been lost in this translation as well. So I think it's, you know, I knew when the EA O'Bannon thing started, I said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And so
something's going to change.
Well, it had to.
Yeah.
It wasn't right. Yeah. You know, I'd run into Bo or Charles and I'd say, I saw you in this video game. Did you get any compensation? Well, no. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. That money is going to EA. It's going to the NCAA. It's going to the member institutions. It's going to the Collegiate Licensing Corporation. But you're the composition. You're the talent, the composition of the game. And so, you know, it shouldn't have stayed in the courts that long.
Agreed.
It could have been. And if you look at the legal fees that the NCAA's expended, that money could have gone back into the pot.
The only people that are making money are the lawyers.
Which is usually the case. I mean, they're lobbying Congress right now. I mean, it just so. I think there's obviously, are there going to be hiccups? Absolutely. there aren't anything like this, but it's long overdue.
Yes. What's harder, being a CEO or trying to write a book that you're doing right now?
Being the CEO. Writing the book was a labor of love, and I've been giving the speech, and it's in my heart. Getting it down on paper, and I've got some great help with that. But being a CEO is hard. You got a lot of people working for you. You got tons of competition. You got things that move at the speed of lightning. You have to make decisions on the fly. Some are informed, some are uninformed. So, and I think the definition of CEO is evolving. But again, the CEO is only as good as the team he's got around him or hers around him. And so, you got to work very hard on your culture, the value systems of the organization, how you treat those people. Most people now have 2 generations of employees. They've got the people that have got kids and all that, and then you got the young generation, young bucks, and so you're always constantly looking for that balance. Within your organization stuff. So it's you wear a lot of different hats as a CEO.
Yes. So in that position, what's some words of wisdom that you try to pass on? Now, you've shared a lot already, but do you have any other particular phrases, mottos, quotes, or just life advice that you really kind of focus on?
I don't remember who said this, but change is inevitable, growth is optional. Choose wisely. And so this pandemic is a perfect example of that. Easiest thing would be to do is, particularly, by the way, I woke up the morning of March the 13th and had millions of dollars of revenue wiped out in one day. I mean, we do hundreds of events a year. Well, there are no live events and there's no sporting events. So it would have been very easy to have gotten under the covers. But I was like, we got a great organization, a great foundation, we got great people, we've done great work. We're just going to evolve what that means. And so I look at it as long as we don't have anybody, harmed or health or suffer from the virus, we're looking at it as a tremendous growth opportunity. Now, nobody would have seen that, and it's easy to, it's hard. It's a grind mentally and psychologically, particularly we're in the service business, but I'm like, hey, this is going to pass. This too shall pass. It's easy to be a hero in good times. We know that a lot of our competitors won't make it. So that's going to create an opportunity in the marketplace. We know there's going to be a lot of great talent out there. We know there's going to be a lot of great opportunity. Let's just figure out where that is. And so having a lot of conversations, and then try to do good, treat everybody with humanity, try to help these kids. But, like I said, change is inevitable, growth is optional, choose wisely.
I love that. Yeah, that hits home, really does, because I think you have to be able to view that life is always changing and you've got to be able to evolve. And if you're too rigid, that's when people are going to fail, from that perspective.
Well, and that's that gives perfectionists, fits and starts.
Oh, yes, it does.
Because,
yes.
And this is what I tell the kids too. When you're 20, you think life is linear. And life is like the Great American Scream Machine. That's what I tell them. And that's the thread they'll hear from the speakers. The other thing is that you're going to get knocked off the saddle. Get back on there. And, it's really the golden rule. Just treat one another the way. And the other thing is I tell kids, and I wish I had learned this a lot earlier, is don't take anything personal. Like I used to take every no personally and offensive. And or if I had a dispute with a client or I didn't want to pitch or something like that, because that was my desire and will to win so hard. But then I finally had to say, it's like, some days people may have other things going on that they had a bad day off. Some days my ideas might not have been as good as others. And then you just pick yourself up and dust yourself off and keep moving forward. And so that was one of the hardest lessons I had to learn in the real world and as a CEO.
Oh, that's tough. Yeah, that is.
And I still have, struggle from time to time.
Yeah, you still have to probably have to battle that.
Yeah. But you just learn that, you don't know what somebody's going through. So that might impact their behavior or their response to you or what you're pitching them or something like that. Yeah. But I'm kind of excited about the pivot that I'm making and our business is making, because we're really well known as an events marketing company. But if I would call on clients or prospects and they'd say, well, we already have an event services company, that would sort of eliminate that opportunity. So now we're like, all right, what more can we add where we go back and say, yeah, we do great events. However, we do these things now. And like I said, if you don't lose anybody in this pandemic, it's changing the way people think in the professional world, because like even 3 months ago, ideas that I would bring to somebody, they would say, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard of. Now they're like, hey, maybe that wasn't so crazy. So I think it's going to sort of level the playing field for,
Yeah, could it give people a different way to look, have a different lens?
Yeah. Well, I'm like, say if I was pitching a food service company or something like that, well, their only objective at the time was driving people in that environment. And now they're like, well, okay, maybe there's some more things we need to do to, create a purchase in the in-home environment, or have an interaction with the fan and the viewer and the sports star, and dropping the food in there and an ice cold Coke or whatever that is as well. So it's definitely shifted mindsets.
For sure. When did you fall in love with Batman?
As a child. And then my son and I kind of have a fun hobby that if we're traveling, we go try to find some Batman memorabilia. And so, anytime you have to try to find common ground when you're a teenager, you take it.
That's right. What's your most prized Batman possession then?
Well, my mother threw away my bat belt a long time ago.
Oh no!
But I do have.
Thanks, Mom.
I do have a replica. 1 to like 164, the Batmobile, and the vaunted Bat boat.
Oh.
So that's probably my most vaunted possession. But I mean, I'm the old timey Batman.
Oh, I know.
The television series.
I grew up on that too.
And
Splat, bam,
yeah,
all of that.
Yeah, the movies never did it justice to me. But like I said, it's and that's the other thing. I mean, I read a lot growing up. I read comic books. I read Sports Illustrated, and I still read a lot today, and to be informed. And I think that's a lost gift or lost art as well. You get it on the phone and you're scrolling and this and that. I read, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sports books, learned to read doing that, learn my retention of it, my articulation of it, and that kind of stuff. So, a lot of opportunity out there.
Love it. Vince, thank you so much. I
You're
greatly
welcome.
appreciate it. This was
You're
fantastic.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Rich Take on Sports. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.